not a good sign, John, that this went by different names at some point.
Oh.
It's only, anytime you have something that's
Was
got
it
multiple
Mr.
names,
No
it's like-
Legs?
it only had a couple. It only had like two.
Mr. Sharp
Yeah.
Teeth?
It was called Rat Fucker.
Oh my God.
Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody. This is the podcast where we watch something and give you our thoughts afterward. I am your host, Michael Dixon. With me is the regular crew, Ryan King. How's it going?
It's going well. I have a real craving for Coppola's Dracula.
Oh,
You really don't have to.
I really, I think I have to revisit it.
interesting. Well, John Garcia may be able to give you some thoughts on that. He watched that movie fairly recently, didn't you, John?
I did. And I gotta say, the best thing about that movie is Keanu Reeves trying to do a British accent.
I've seen many strange things already. Bloody wolves chasing me through some blue inferno.
It's just adorable.
I know where the bastard sleeps. I brought him there. To Carfax Abbey.
Well, we are not talking about Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. We are talking about Nosferatu the Vampyr from 1979, directed by the great and terrifying Werner Herzog.
Last night, after a tiresome journey, I finally reached my destination, the castle of Count Dracula.
At midnight, all sorts of evil spirits are set loose. People disappear without a trace.
The ship seems burdened with a curse. One sailor and our cook have disappeared.
Nosferatu the Vampyr, a film unlike any Dracula film ever made.
This movie is a remake of the 1922 silent film Nosferatu, which is a kind of a very fascinating movie that is kind of the peak of the German expressionist movement. Herzog said that he thought it was the most important film in the history of Germany and like really wanted to make sure he got it right, like making a sound version of that film. I'm excited for Ryan to tell us why this is not a Dracula story, because we've brought this up in the past. Ryan has been very insistent that Nosferatu and Dracula are different, and I'm like, okay, that's bullshit. They're the same thing. But we'll see. We'll get to that and see why Ryan thinks that this is not a Dracula movie, despite the fact that the character is named Count Dracula.
They sometimes call him Nosferatu. They can't always make it
unclear. Nosferatu is like some sort of evil spirit that is like inhabiting Count Dracula. I don't know. Anyway, this is written and directed by Werner Herzog, also with English language lines that were written by other writers. This movie was shot in both German and English because Herzog wanted it to have a wider spread than just the German film audience and get it to an international audience. I watched the German version. I know, John, you watched the English version.
Yep.
When I saw, I have it on Blu-ray and I put it in and I was like, oh my God, there are two versions. Like, that's crazy. I can't believe they basically shot this movie twice. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, there's like very little dialogue in this. Actually, they probably only had to shoot most scenes one time. And then, the little dialogue in there, they had to do it twice. But
yep.
I really liked this movie. I thought it was an interesting way to adapt a silent film into a sound story where instead of adding a bunch of extra plot and dialogue that wasn't there in the source material, it really is very bare in a lot of ways. There's just not a lot of character development. There's not a lot of dialogue. It really is leaning into atmosphere and vibes, kind of like a silent movie would have done in the 20s. Probably more so because he could score this movie, and like silent films mostly didn't have their own scores. They just had the theaters, play the house orchestra at the theater would play whatever music they wanted over the movie that was playing. But I really liked the vibe of this thing. Very ethereal and dreamlike, and it's almost not even really a horror movie. It's just kind of trying to pull you into this trance-like state as you're watching this story unfold. It's really leaning hard into German expressionism, big eyes, overacting, but it doesn't feel like, it's not like you're watching a 1930s studio film and seeing people act to the back row. It's like they're doing a thing, but it feels very cinematic. It doesn't feel like a stage performance. I think I don't know. I thought it was a really cool experience. Not really a horror film, but it's kind of unsettling in the vibes that it's doing. But it's not a scary score or unsettling music. It's just it almost is kind of lulling you into the story. And it's like, I watched this late at night and I like almost fell asleep a couple times. And it was like, it's just kind of putting you into this trance as you are going through the story and experiencing whatever you're experiencing on screen. I haven't seen a lot of sound movies that take this kind of approach and lean so hard into silent movie tropes and trying to do those things. I've seen the 1922 silent movie and didn't love it. I thought there were some scenes that were really interesting, but I thought it dragged a lot in parts and could have been cleaned up and edited to be a shorter version. But I thought
that's most silent films.
Yeah, a lot of times that's the case for silent films. I think that Nosferatu the Vampyr is really great, and I think it's actually shorter than the 1922 silent film, but it gives you all of the beats of the story that you need without over explaining and diving into vampire lore that everyone already knows. It just kind of shows you what's happening, and you pick up on things as they occur. But I had a really great time with this. Ryan, what did you think about Nosferatu the Vampyr?
I don't think I had as good a time.
Oh, okay.
I think just because I get what Herzog is going for, and it's a very pretty movie, like really amazing shots. Very early on, I kind of just had this feeling of like each frame's like a painting. Like you could just pause it, and it's like an old kind of pre-impressionism painting of just like lady sitting in chair with cats, right? Like kind of shit like that. It's pretty faithful to the 1922 version of it. Obviously, this is the like Count Orlok look, but it is so slow. It is a lot like a silent movie with like words added to it, and so it has the same kind of like slowness and pacing. I think that I've really noticed more that at some point in cinema, I feel like we kind of figured out editing and storytelling that has, like in movies today, sometimes in 30 minutes, you can tell more and evoke more emotion than movies did in 2 hours prior. Because it's just like we know the beats more, and we as the audience know like what to expect from movies. Like we have a code now. We there's this understanding that allows things to go faster, where I think back in that early cinema, that transition from like stage play to movie was rough. And there was so much effort to like kind of help the audience figure out, like bring them along on the journey. And there's so much like, especially in those silent movies, like the pause and then the title card and then enough time for everyone to fucking read it. And then we go back and we pause. I just felt that slowness. It adds to the eeriness. Like I appreciated that. And the weird music, especially the fucking kid playing violin or whatever.
That
like,
may or may not be real. Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. Adds to the creepiness of all of it. But I swear at the beginning of this movie, for a chunk of it, I was like, this could be a satire. Like it felt so strange to almost like come back around to be like, it's kind of making fun of it. The best example to me is the scene where he's at the inn or wherever the fuck he is, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm going up to Dracula's castle, and like everyone fucking drops their plates and like turns and stares at him.
It's comedic.
And then no one says anything. Everyone just stares at him the whole time. No one goes back to their thing. And I was like, that's almost like ridiculous, but also to the point that I was like, I think if I was that guy, that would be unsettling enough for me to be like, all right, maybe I need it. Not to just be like, yeah, fuck y'all. Like, they'd be like, that obviously unrattled these people enough for them to just fucking stare at me for 5 minutes without doing anything.
But he's going to get a really good commission on this real estate deal.
It's
supposedly,
so good.
I guess.
Yeah.
He's an ancient realtor apparently. It allowed me to think too much, I think, is what really is a problem. And that's probably like where me having something like this, where I'm bringing a bunch to it, I'm sitting there going like, where did Dracula get watermelon from? And then like, right. And just shit like, I'm like, oh, apparently no one goes up there, but he can get horses to carry his coffins away. Like I'm fucking just sitting there like thinking about the movie, where I think on the 22
I don't think those
version,
are the types of things you're supposed to be worried about in this movie.
No,
Right?
I'm not. Right.
Yeah.
In the 1922 version, I'm just sort of like, it's kind of like a mystical, stage play. You kind of just have to give up to it. But by like 1979, I kind of like expect a little bit of like thought around it. When you read it in a novel, you don't have to think about any of that shit, right? And I'll totally admit, I've always thought Bram Stoker's Dracula is kind of a questionable novel.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting and important like to history, but it's actually like a bunch of fucking letters to each other, and it's kind of boring through a lot of parts and kind of weird. People remember the like 31 to Bela Lugosi,
31,
and that's like their that's their Dracula. And if they go read the book, they're like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was at all. This is maybe a step closer to the book, and also a step closer to the 1922. Like it kind of splits the difference in being a little bit different. So yeah, it's overacted. It's over like makeup. It's over like a little bit over the top of everything.
But that's what it's trying to do.
I was like
that's kind of the point,
Yeah. I kind of just came with the like, but why? Like, why did we need it? I think that was where I was just like, Herzog could have done. I mean, he did something. He put another movie out like that year. He's fucking constantly putting shit out. And I was like, I get it. It's a love letter. It's better than the fucking Van Zandt Psycho like love letter.
Yeah.
And at least there's potentially a need here to take something like from silent, from black and white to modern to color to real soundtrack to right. Like there's a lot more that's available tools, but I don't know how effectively they were used.
Interesting. John, what did you think?
I thought it was quite good. And the Dracula, he was always drinking, not rejecting the bitter waters of humanity's own production. And no, I enjoyed this movie. It is something that, in a similar vein to what Ryan saw when he watched it, I had the same question of like, how many times are we going to retell Bram Stoker's Dracula? This is the Little Women of horror films, in which we feel compelled every few decades to have a different version come up.
I'm excited for the Robert Eggers version
of Little Women. Yes, I agree.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. I'm on board. But yeah, like I did love the dreamlike qualities to it. I recognized parts of it like rang through to me sort of Green Knight-ish. Like there was similar vibes in the landscape shots and sort of the days and the sort of projection of like who the hero is. One thing that I really liked about it compared to other interpretations I've seen is that like the woman who is in the cast is primarily a hero here. Like everybody else kind of sucks, but it is like the woman who has the power to kill the Count, to stun the Count. Like sure, Van Helsing delivered the final blow at the stake, but it was like a woman's sacrifice that was required leading up to it. Whereas in so many other films that I've seen, and this isn't even just in like the canon of Count Orlok or Nosferatu or Vampire, like, Dracula, whatever. It's been a woman who has kind of been on the sidelines, who's been like just some prize to be won or something to be manipulated. I've even watched recently Dracula 2000, which, Ryan, I don't know if you've seen it, but God damn it, that movie. And it just is like they downplay the role of women in that same mythical context. And here I really liked it. She sort of had this like, I know what I need to do. I need to distract the Count until the cock crows, and here's what's going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. Like everything around that was kind of interesting to watch, but that piece I really latched onto and I really appreciated. Klaus Kinski, just so fucking unsettling and creepy. Even though it's done in a way that is melodramatic and does invoke that kind of, it is that German expressionism and could be qualified to some degree as like a sort of stage play melodramatics and melotheatrics, still managed to unsettle me in just how close he got to some of the characters, the sort of like breath that he shared. The fact that the film takes pauses here and there to let you hear characters breathe was unsettling alone. I don't like hearing people breathe for too long. And it was just like, no, I don't want this.
I wondered what this was like with headphones. I was like, this is not a movie for headphones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I really appreciated that. And also just like a shit ton of rats, an admirable amount of rats. I'm really concerned with what they did with the rats after this movie was
I know
shot.
what they did with the rats.
No, I don't want to know. Don't tell me. Did they lend them out to a Jodorowsky film, please?
Yeah, I had
spare me the details.
Unfortunately, I think most of the rats did not survive the production.
Yeah,
I was fairly certain that was
so.
what happened.
So there was like an animal trainer or something on set who later, like in like a couple decades later, came out and said that Herzog was like treating the animals very cruelly, and the rats, he ordered a bunch of rats and he got them and they were white, and he was like, I wanted gray rats, not white rats. And so he's like, we have to dye the rats gray. And they put the rats in cages and dipped them into like hot dye.
Oh no!
And half of the rats died in this process.
God damn it! And the other half died.
No, the other half immediately licked all the dye off of themselves. Of
course they did.
Which is exactly what the animal trainer told Herzog they would do.
God damn it,
and
Herzog!
So all the rats in the movie are white because like they couldn't, keep the gray dye on them.
Herzog, it's fine. Like metaphorically, having white rats is okay. There's a contrast with purity and the fucking plague. It's fine. Oh my God. That's so upsetting to me.
Yeah.
No, they Beastmastered them.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was telling Darla. I was like, oh man, it's like Beastmaster. We get the wrong thing. We'll just fucking paint it over like that. It works.
But yeah, like, so like I was obviously in admiration. I still kind of am of how many rats they got on. Very disappointed in you, Werner Herzog, but I also understand your cruel nature. And the dream sequences too. Like I really appreciated and loved the dream sequences. They were very unsettling and captured perfectly kind of how like a fever dream would. The whole like market square kind of segment was really rad. So yeah, to summarize, like, I've seen Nosferatu. I've seen now the Vampire Nosferatu. I've seen Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. Sorry, I gotta get it right.
Have you seen the Lugosi movie from 31?
I have not seen the Lugosi movie from 31.
It's not bad.
In terms of like pop culture, I'm aware of it, but have not seen it. And so like at this point, I kind of know enough about the story. I will say Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula goes on for way too long. This one, it felt like it went on for a little bit longer than it should have. And then Nosferatu, just because it's silent, also has pacing issues. I would like to see a Dracula film where it doesn't feel like it has pacing issues. Maybe that's Bela Lugosi's. I don't know. But
interesting.
Maybe, probably. I think you have to get away from the book.
That's kind of
that's like part of the problem.
But there's maybe it's also because of the dreamlike state and like the mesmerizing aspect of it that made it feel slower and sort of like a lullaby in a way. But like any one of them so far that I've been through, there's a piece of it where I'm like, all right, I get it. Like I want to get through part of this. I understand. So that's kind of my takeaway from it. I did like it.
Interesting. To me, this is by far the best of any of the Dracula and Nosferatu movies that I have seen. And I loved the pacing. Like I was absolutely there for it. Like I thought the creepy, weird, dreamlike vibe was super cool. And like you talk about how the dream sequences were really well done. I think part of what makes the movie super interesting is that you are not necessarily sure if any one sequence is a dream sequence or reality. Yeah. Like the way that he shoots reality is so dreamlike that you're really unsure what is happening at any moment. Like there's a lot of scenes approaching the castle and at the castle where you're not sure if he's imagining what's going on or if Dracula is actually like attacking him and drinking his blood. Like there are gypsies that are like, there's no castle up there. It's actually just a myth. Like there's nothing there. And he goes up there on foot and can't find anything. And then a random like ghost coach picks him up and takes him to the castle. And it's like, you're not really sure what's going on. Maybe he just dies up in the mountains and like all of this is some weird death fever dream that he's imagining. From the like Dracula, from like the vampire book that the hostess at the inn gave him. But I thought everything was just really, really great filmmaking, and I was really on its wavelength of what it was trying to do. Understand if it's not your thing and it's not, how you want to spend an hour and 47 minutes, but I really enjoyed it and thought it was really well done. And I think like there's not a lot of plot in the Dracula story, right? Yeah. Like it's, the horrifying story of a real estate deal gone wrong or maybe gone right. And then you just stuck with a shitty neighbor. Like there's not a lot there. And I think the strength of the story is in the vibes and the atmosphere and just the weirdness of it all. And I think Herzog really leans into that and does a great job of putting this super weird nightmare experience on screen and like having you doubt any given scene, whether it's really happening or not, as if you were kind of drifting in and out of consciousness as you're watching the film.
I think that's where like it becomes, because in like a contemporary lens, when I'm watching this film, you have so many moments where I'm sure Ryan, you and I both were like you didn't question that. No, you're just gonna go with it. Yes. Like you're just gonna fucking roll with whatever this is. Like look, okay, if you cut your hand on a butter knife and somebody sucked your fucking thumb, I'm gonna be like, okay, I need to leave. I'm sorry, I just need to go.
The doors were locked.
No matter how many. That's the problem. Like. And okay, fine. Well, how can I get whatever else is going on here to stop? That's what I need. That's where like there's like logical corners of it that I felt like to a degree I would be more indignant or I would have this kind of reaction to it. And like as an audience member, I might disagree with it. And again, that's like contemporary lens. Maybe in like 79 when you're going through different kinds of the horror genre as a whole is going through like another renaissance. There's a lot of things that are being introduced before the 80s really hits. And here is one.
Halloween was 78.
Yeah. And so you're like, okay,
Shining was 80.
This is all kind of like this slow pacing, sort of weird. How are we going to deal with this? But now of all times is definitely when I like had that little voice in the back of my head that was like, I would get the fuck out of there. Like, I don't care how, I'm going to figure out my way. And I want to watch this character try to get out of there. And then if they can't get out, then fine. It's kind of like in a modern film when somebody's like, we have no cell signal. You're like, oh, well, you're absolutely fucked. Like you just throw your hands up and you give up to it. Back then it's kind of like, well, I can't get a letter out to anybody. And you're like, oh, well, you're fucked. Like, I don't know how you're going to get get through this.
He's got to get that commission, man. He's got to make his nut, get a bigger house for his wife.
Yeah, he wants to get his nut and help his wife get a bigger house. And I love that they established that with fucking Renfield, who they don't even name Renfield at that time. But if you know enough about the story, you're like, that's fucking Renfield. Because that dude laughs way too much. That dude is way too jolly about this like absurd task he's sending somebody to do. But that whole thing, like it sends you off kilter. That's like the best kind of primer for the story. And I really was engaged by Renfield as a character, like sending him to do this. It was kind of this, like, oh, we got this one thing that we're supposed to send you to. And the whole time in between him telling Harker how to do it, he's like laughing awkwardly and then gives him stuff and like laughs. And then he laughs maniacally once he leaves. And it's just one of those, like, this again feels like that German expressionism, that melodrama where somebody is acting really hard to indicate who they are and what their relation to the story could be.
Yeah.
But I thought that it worked really well. It made me unsettled. It made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between expressionism and melodrama, right? Where I think melodrama is often driven by plot, right? Like you have soap opera type of scenarios and kind of absurd relationship problems that don't feel realistic, and maybe you have over the top acting in connection with that. But like I think expressionism is like, fuck the plot. We're just going to be weird and we're going to do kind of over the top facial expressions and like, you know, Nicolas Cage type of things in a like quieter environment, you know, like less yelling than Nicolas Cage. But I think it's different, and it's trying to achieve a different thing, like a different experience with the audience than what melodrama is trying to do.
Yeah.
I think that, so yeah, I was also bugged by how much Harker like doesn't back off from all the weirdness of everything he's presented with. I feel like in the book, because it's more the letters and the back and forth, that, and I think that Coppola's nails this, the sort of like dreamlikeness of he's not quite sure what's happening and what's not happening. And especially in 79, Herzog has the ability to kind of play up that more, like make things more supernaturally weird. And there's a few times where it's like, is he waking up from a dream? Kind of things like that it would have been better to kind of nail that a little more. Like it's unsettling in the right ways, but it never really kind of nails down to me that like Dracula's enthralling, right?
Oh yeah.
Everything it's like it's so slow that you're like, don't just lay there in bed like waiting on him walking.
When he wakes up and sees Dracula above him,
standing at the end of his bed.
There's a bit of it where you're like, just move. Like I don't get it, I don't understand the hypnotic aspects of it. Like I get, so like reframing one of those scenes where he wakes up and he sees, you know, the Count right above him, and it's done in this like you know, medium shot, like it's as big as the room could be, and you're seeing sort of the intimacy between the characters. It feels sexual in how the Count is standing over him. But to really
what about this movie isn't sexual?
It's true. The heavy breathing, the fucking constant movement between characters, like the physicality of it.
She has a beautiful neck.
Oh my God, that's your bride. She has a beautiful neck. And like there's this quality like Ilya Klimov has in his films, like Come and See, and some of his other films where he uses like full-on profile shots to show you what the characters are feeling and how they're enraptured with it. I know Tarkovsky probably does that a little bit too in some of his films, where he just like lets you get enveloped in their gaze. And I wanted that for this, like when the Count's standing over Harker, I would love to see both of them locking eyes, because it's not only like in the full shot, you see them sort of exchanging this gaze as well. And like Harker being like just overwhelmed with it and allowing whatever is going to happen, whether it's with his will or not, it doesn't matter. But I would have actually loved to have more of an engagement in the mesmerization that Dracula is supposed to have over his victims, this like hypnotic vision, to be more personable to the audience as well, to be like, oh fuck, like something actively is compelling you to stay there, because just watching somebody react to it, you're kind of in this moment where you're like, move, like I know you can move, just move, like I would have moved, sort of thing. Like this reaction.
Are you saying you wanted a sexier Dracula?
I think so. Honestly, that's really what it is. It kind of is a
like
sexier
Robert
Dracula.
Pattinson.
I mean, well, he could still have long fingernails. That's fine. But like, if he was staring directly into me and I just saw these like these big black eyes like a doe's eyes, then maybe I would be a little more compelled to stay.
The weird rat teeth. Like for some reason in this one, the two front teeth are the long ones.
They're so
not
pronounced.
like the incisors, but the two front teeth are super long and pointy.
That's you know, for ease of access for Dracula.
Yeah.
Fuck it, why not?
I think if Dracula's like Howard Hughes, like Leonardo DiCaprio, Howard Hughes, right? There's like a charisma, but also a weirdness that then you kind of have. I think that's where Bela Lugosi kind of nails, or Christopher Lee kind of nails the Dracula. Like you could see how people are like, he's weird. I mean, Gary Oldman nails this too. Ass for hair and all. Right. Of like, there is a strange guy who's been up here, but like, he seems like he's just eccentric.
Yeah. Like a cult leader type of personality kind of thing.
This one really
Versus
seems more like you're talking to a serial killer and you know it.
Or a zombie.
And he looks
almost.
fucking, he looks so weird. Like, this and
he's got the elf ears.
Count Orlok, right? Yeah, they just look problematic.
Yeah. And like, too, it's sure, Jonathan Harker is a progressive guy. He allows people from all walks of life to buy property. I suppose that's cool. But like, it's one of those things where, one, everything that Dixon has laid out has happened. Plenty of gypsy people have been like, you can't go there because there's nothing there to begin with. They gave him a fucking Necronomicon or whatever the fuck it was. And then he walked his whole way there. Even the fucking stagecoach guy was like, don't have horses to sell you. Like, he's just lying.
Like, there isn't a road up there. He's like, what are you talking about? It's right here. He's like, nope. What if I buy take one of your horses? I'll bring it back. I don't have any horses. You got 6 of them right here.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like all of those things, and Harker's still like, this castle at the top. I guess I needed to take a ghost stagecoach to find it. And like, he just seems like the biggest idiot walking into it because he needs the money, which is, fine. I understand it. You need the money, but like, still every part of your body should tell you to not go there. And and yet you do. And so like, to a degree, I felt a disconnect as an audience member. And then to see the Count and be like, what the fuck? This guy, he's always been this way. He's not like a regular dude in a business suit whose shadow happens to be the fucking monster he is, or that kind of thing. So that's where I felt like it lined more with like a melodrama than like a expressionism. I don't know. I'm misusing melodrama in this instance. It's a hyperbolic story.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is where I'm like, how did he get the message out that he needed a new house, and how did he know that Harker was showing up if no one goes? Like, where does he get his mail?
Don't worry about it.
From?
I'm assuming he sent Renfield ahead.
Yeah, that's
to
the
like
thing.
Find. I'm guessing what happened.
It's a long con.
Is that he just like ate everyone on that mountain, right? And like people like moved away and stopped going there, and all the like gypsy population is like, hey, you need to stay away from there. Like, that's not cool. He's like, fuck, I need another big, massive, decrepit house that's like closer to civilization, and like sent Renfield out to find one. And Renfield found one, got a job in that town, and like sent somebody out to go fetch
the fucking
him.
Longest con possible, run by a man who bleeds communities dry and overwhelms them with plague, which we don't even know that plague is part of this until halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
But it is. So I'm kind of curious about that as well, because I don't know. So it's been a long time since I've seen Nosferatu. Did Nosferatu have the plague thing as well to it?
I don't remember. The things that stick out to me from that movie are just like the scenes with him making his eyes as big as possible and walking creepily, and like those were the scenes that I liked the best, and those that kind of stuck with me. But I don't really remember a lot of the details. I do remember that he moves and ships himself via coffin to get to the new place to wreak havoc on the new place. But yeah.
No, this is honestly maybe 98% faithful to the Nosferatu movie, which is a Dracula ripoff. Like, absolutely, they were making a Dracula movie, didn't get the copyright, and just fucking made it anyway. But the Dracula does take it's all into London in the book, right? Which is, in here it's set in Germany.
Yeah.
The same thing with Nosferatu, the original one. Like, they were kind of like, we'll localize it, right? What you do. So he's just taking the ship to get there faster. And then it just fucking like crashes right up to his house, his front door. The part with like spreading the plague, that doesn't happen in the book. Or really, I don't think any of the other adaptations I know of, but it does happen in the 22 Nosferatu. The sunlight thing, the old movie, is the one that introduced that. Like in the book.
Oh, interesting.
And and in Coppola's version, right, he can just like put on a hat and a big cloak and some dark sunglasses, and it's kind of like uncomfortable for him to be out during the day, but he can go out if he wants to.
Yeah.
It allows him to be more where he can kind of hide among people, right? He sort of stands out, and if you talk to him, he's kind of weird, but it's never really like, you fucking look at the Nosferatu here and you're like, something's fucking up with that guy. And he talks and he breathes heavily over you. Yeah.
Shit, even when he runs, it's awkward.
His hands are very cold.
Yeah. Exactly.
I do like that. and I feel like there's been so many movies since 1979 that have tried to like humanize vampires that like watching it now, it doesn't feel as interesting, but I can't imagine there was much before this where they were trying to make you empathize with Dracula and understand what he was going through. And like Herzog seems to be saying with the movie that like actually life is what's scary and death is like the easy way out, and like having to just suffer the daily horrors of existence are actually the thing that torment you and kind of like, like bring you pain and suffering to have to deal with. And I thought that was an interesting idea that, is completely absent from the 22 version because you just can't get into complex ideas like that in a silent film.
Yeah.
But I thought that the way that he did that was cool, and kind of a way that I felt like this was a bridge toward more modern ideas on vampires and trying to make them into tween heartthrob shit kind of things, like this movie is not doing that, but I'm like, oh, this was the slippery slope that brought us to Twilight. This was like the first step down that.
The skin of a killer. Yeah.
But I liked what Herzog was trying to do, and to be like, actually, it's just agony to be alive, and he just wants to die, but he can't. And like, at the end of the movie, he seems to kind of know what he's doing, like walking into the sun on purpose, and he's just kind of finally given up and just doesn't want to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, there's a bit of it like where it's come back and forth. And that was my question too, when he's talking about how painful life is and like to not die. It's like, you think that death is like the scariest thing. Well, like not dying is this. But then the question becomes like, why don't you just die? Why don't you just kill yourself in a way? And it becomes this like Albert Camus,
he's a chicken.
This Camus kind of quandary of like, why can't you do it? And there's not really like a deeper conversation that happens. Not that there has to be. I think that the question is interesting alone. If you know that you're an immortal being and you are to have watched him refrain from trying to eat people or do these things or spread this plague would have been a different story. But like the moment he's on land in the latter half, he's just kind of like, just fucking go. Like, let's just spread the plague. And let's kill all these people and do all of these things.
I think he doesn't view death as bad. Right?
He doesn't anymore.
Like, he doesn't actually think that he is creating ill for these people.
He thinks life is suffering.
Yeah.
And that's where like he's become kind of like in this different state of, but it becomes like it betrays, to me anyway, his philosophy of like, well, if life is suffering, why are you still alive? He doesn't muse about it and he doesn't know about it, it seems. He's just kind of like using it to justify how he kills others and like drains their life, which is fine in the context of the story. But it is one of those things where I'm like, I really kind of like to have a character who grapples with that beyond just the platitudes that Dracula in this movie expounds, where he says it a few different times and it seems like something profound, but at the end of it, he never faces his own hypocrisy. He just kind of is like, okay, I guess I'm just doing it. Well, let's just roll with it, Renfield. Let's kill these people and do whatever. I guess that's more of like the contemporary lens now when we're in this era of, again, like we've gone through genres, different genre phases with this particular horror story, where in the 20s, he's clearly a villain by all means. In the 70s, he has a little bit more humanity, sort of anti-hero-ish. In the 90s, he's romanticized, and there is this deeper level of understanding to his character and sensuality and who he is as a character. And now I feel like we would especially be post-Twilight in this phase of just like, yeah, fuck it. This guy's an asshole and he should really reckon with it. Like he should have some kind of hypocrisy he comes to understand in it. And so that's when I watched this movie, I was like, why doesn't he recognize what he's doing? He's just being the same asshole that he's purporting should not live and like all this other shit. It doesn't make any sense to me. But again, one perspective I took when watching it.
Sure. Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah. I think that if that had something to do with his downfall, but it kind of doesn't. I also think it's interesting that the movie gives the like some reasoning of like, oh, he's the demon Belial made him or something. But then it then be like, oh, he has this conversation about like he's been alive forever and it sucks and he wants some like real love or whatever. But I'm like, well, but if he's created by a demon, why does he give a fuck? Right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But like, even when he gets like, even the plot point of like a woman who can distract him from the cock crowing is just a woman who's so hot he has to suck her blood for the whole night, and then she kind of moans and touches him a little bit. That wasn't like there was no courtship that happened. There was a full trap ensnarement from a person using their body as bait. And it's different than what I thought a woman tricking him into like being out of the cock crows. Like, I'm not going to say that this should have been a Woody Allen film. With Dracula outside having an awkward conversation with a woman or any of that shit. And then the cock crows and he's, I shouldn't be out right now. But like to a degree, I kind of thought that there would be a little bit more of like this back and forth, this assertiveness of like a woman really taking her place in what is like a regressive or repressive society and being like, well, this fucking Van Helsing never believed me. Van Helsing is fucking dick in this movie too. He just like mansplains everything and he's like, yeah, you don't know about science, you fucking woman.
Yeah. He gives the same condescending speech about science like 3 times.
Every fucking time. And to have her be like, well, I just have to do it. I have to sacrifice my body. And then after he sees her dead, he's like, my God, I should have listened. I was like, oh, fuck off. It would have been much more entertaining.
Well, he gets punished immediately for
That's
that.
right. Take him to jail, whoever you are, you old man who's part of this government.
Where are we going to take him? I don't know. Just fucking take him.
Well, fucking kill him
All
on
the
sight.
cops are dead. We don't have any prison guards. Where am I going to put him?
Pioneer justice. String him up. Fuck it. But yeah, like I expected a little bit more of that. Not to say like from the movie I expected it, but in the context of a narrative where it's ramped up. Like she talks about it a lot. She read the book. She has the knowledge. She has these ideas. And then to see her great plan just be, I'm going to just sit here in a nightgown and offer up my neck and I'll hold him for a little bit and moan, was kind of underwhelming. So it was like a bit of that. I'm just like, okay, fine. Again, like it plays into the dreamlike quality because I'm not entirely sure what's happening and it feels oddly sexual. So it's all just kind of like fever dreamish in the way that it plays out, and him standing over her and the slow realization that the cock crows. I liked that. And it kind of reminded me of The Hour of the Wolf.
Yeah, I can see
you have
that.
those moments where you're just feeling time pass. I wish that there had been a little bit more leading up to it.
Yeah.
Building.
And actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I had Hour of the Wolf feelings too. I think mine were, I wish I was watching Hour of the Wolf, which is interesting because I think I remember kind of being a little bit more down on that movie than you guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I was kind of like, I feel that did the creepiness and the sort of surrealness of all of it better. And that's kind of what I
think that's a high bar.
Like, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say that I think, John, you mentioned, scenes where you can feel time pass. I think one of the things this movie does really well too is like there are a lot of times where you're not sure how time is passing or if time is passing or like what's going on. And it's like you're not sure if like weeks are going by or hours or days. And it just adds to the dreamlike, eerie atmosphere where you're just kind of not sure if what you're seeing is real or how much time has taken place since the previous scene and like how many, has this guy slept since this last thing happened or not? And like, I think all of that works really well where some moments you're very aware that time is going by second by second. And other times you're like, I have no idea how time is passing.
Oh yeah. Cause even Renfield at the beginning is just like, it might take you a while to do whatever this deal is, but he's very vague about how long it could take. And so like the concept of time and there's only one time when they really narrow down how long it takes anything. And that's how long it takes to get to the castle. It takes 4 weeks to get to the castle by land. And that's when Dracula's like, I need to go by sea so I can get to wherever the fuck your town is faster. And that's like the only time that they really use the concept of time to show you like, this is greater than this other time period. And like, beyond that, it really is, you're just adrift in whatever the characters are feeling and how they're going through it. We don't even get a good sense of how long it takes Harker to change. as like a person into whatever vampire state he's in. So spoilers, everybody. Jonathan Harker fucking becomes a vampire. Whoops.
But he's able to be kept in a corner with some communion wafer crumbs.
Hell yeah, that's right. I got to give me some of those Jesus. Crumble them up. Oh man. Yeah, that whole sequence. I want to talk about that when Dracula gets to the city, because like everything leading up to that, there's a dream sequence with Harker where he's going through the castle and he's trying to see things, and like there's a stare down between him and Dracula. Dracula stares him into a chair and then like fucking bites his neck. Mm-hmm. Maybe not. Who knows? Like all these things. But when he sees Dracula boarding the stagecoach, he's hiding in a coffin. He's going to go to land. And Jonathan Harker's like, I need to get back to the city. He pieces it together. That's another great like thing, you know, for his character to actively recognize something is wrong. I've let it go too far. And now I need to get back to home. But he doesn't recognize, because of the dreamlike state, that he's been bit. I feel like a good ticking clock of like, oh fuck, here we go. Everything's kind of kicking into gear. And I think that the ship that Dracula gets on, we get like the captain's kind of journal where he's just like, some of the crew's gone, you know, they've fallen ill and then they've died and we don't know what's happening. And as an audience, it's like, okay, Dracula's fucking feeding on them. He's getting
There's
his
rumors
due.
of a strange presence on this ship.
I don't believe it, but it's if somebody says that it's here, and I guess whatever. And then he like ties himself to the fucking wheel, and he's trying to drive himself in. I thought that was the coolest fucking scene of this movie is when that ship just cruises quietly, like dead silence into the city. And then it just hits up on the shore and people were like, my God, man, get like a fucking board and put it on. Let's get him off. And I was like, you'd think they'd have a protocol in the city of like, well, a fucking ghost ship wandered up. Maybe we should not put the board on for too long or something. But that whole moment, there's such a quiet, like it's a calm before a storm. It's such a fucking cool sequence to really feel it out in that vibe. And I felt like that's the strongest resonance I had with the movie.
Yeah.
When this hits.
That was a cool scene. I like how afterwards, like, we don't know what the cause of death was. It's like, maybe because he was just tied to a fucking ship steering wheel and couldn't do anything.
Yeah,
you know, like,
he's emaciated by not eating.
He just like is dehydrated and he died. You know, it's like you don't have to go to vampire sucked his blood to understand how that guy died. Like he just probably just couldn't move and he just died.
Yeah. Who fucking knows? He was like,
I don't know why someone
here.
tied him to that thing. Oh, it turns out he tied himself to the ship. But.
I do love when they're reading through the logbook and they're like, the plague, and then they just fucking all run out of the building.
Yeah.
Like, go home, shut the windows.
Yeah, everybody running from the plague. You know, honestly, maybe I'm drawing comparisons to Sorcerer, but I would have liked it to have started here. I feel like that'd be fucking cool, right? Like to have a ship wash up and you're not sure what's going on and the whole mystery of it. We don't need the backstory of Jonathan Harker, because when you think about it, Jonathan Harker showing up like halfway through whatever this mystery with the ship is, there's so much more complication to the story that would happen from like, who the fuck is this guy? And like the police have arrested this lunatic who keeps laughing and does whatever, like
who like bit a cow and is feeding on a fly trap.
Yeah. Like what the fuck is this shit about? Like it all adds to that same kind of feeling of, I just want to see a French person do this movie, I guess. I don't know. Wages of Fear style or something.
By the way, what happens to Renfield at the end of this movie? Like he escapes. And I don't know that we see him again after he escapes the asylum.
I assume Renfield serves his new master, Jonathan Harker.
Harkin, yeah, it could be.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, like because of the teaser at the end of it, I was like, all right, he's the new Dracula.
Right.
Not that that's really a thing, but you know, fuck it. Sure.
I do like when Renfield gets there for Dracula and he's like rubbing on him and Dracula kind of was like, eh.
Get the fuck away. Yeah. Dracula does that like
away.
A dog coming to greet you, or he's just like, get the fuck off.
Get
down. The dream sequence, whenever Dracula gets in, like we have, I feel like that's when we get really hardcore dream sequences. Before that, like Jonathan Harker has a dream sequence in the castle where he wakes up and he's not sure what happened or whatever, but we get a real one with his lady. What's his lady's name? Is it
Lady Harker?
Lady Harker? Yeah, that's right. So like when Lady Harker has like this whole moment, she's wandering through like the town. There's that creepiness of like people know you, but you don't know them. And everybody's having like a festival. I remember they have the whole thing
It's
where
Lucy. It's Lucy Harker.
Lucy. So yeah, whenever Lucy comes out, like she's seeing like the caskets and whatever come through, and people are parading them, and she's like, I know why all of this is happening. And to me, that line feels like a dream too. Cause like in a dream, you have that epiphany where you're like, I know exactly why this nonsense is fucking going on.
Yeah.
But then immediately it transitions from that to like her going through a town square and everybody's trying to hug her and like touch her and get her to do shit with them. They're like, why don't you come dance with us? And all of a sudden, and she's like, no, I don't fucking want any of that. And it all leads to like this dinner that she wanders into. Where that it's not a family, it's just a bunch of people.
There's like, fuck it, we got the plague. We're gonna like have fun with the rest of our lives.
And like the rats just keep multiplying behind them, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, holy shit. And then it just hard cuts, and it's just a full table of rats like eating on it. And it's such an unsettling image to be like, oh fuck, this whole town is overrun by it. And then she just snaps up and is like, I know what I need to do. I need to fucking kill this vampire some way or another. I need to do it. But that like whole dream sequence, it felt to me so reminiscent of other things that I've seen like in contemporary features. Like I keep thinking of Midsommar for some reason. I don't know why, but there's that kind of like
the shroom
cult,
sequences.
Yeah, there's kind of like a cult aspect to it of like, you know, believing or seeing things that aren't there, and this kind of aspect of like being enveloped in a village. And like, that's where I kind of wondered, is this more than a retelling than Nosferatu and Dracula? Like, does this have some bearing in not even just the 70s, but to either of y'all? Did it have any kind of cultural significance? Because the plague spreads, and the plague is some ideology. And to me, like it being filmed in Germany and there being kind of like a feeling of going along with it, and Nosferatu having anti-Semitic roots as well, in what it is done as like a silent film. I kind of picked up on vibes, but I didn't know if I was reading too much into it, to this like kind of belief in like, you know, fascism kind of casually strolls into a town. It's very unassuming and it overtakes everything. And people eventually start dining and having like meals under the banner of it because fuck it, we're just here anyway. We might as well. So I wasn't sure if either of y'all picked up on it, if I'm reading way too much into this shit, but I wanted to bring it up because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, there are some differences, particularly the ending from the 1922 movie. The anti-Semitism probably stems from it in the novel, honestly. Like the whole thing, there's kind of like two aspects, I guess, to Dracula. One is the creepy sexualness of all of it, and the other is this sort of like outsider coming in, right? And the disease spreading or whatever is kind of also emblematic of that. And the like descriptions, particularly the way Count Orlok or Dracula in this movie are presented, plays even more into that other anti-Semitism potentially. Also, the depiction of like Polish people and Romani people is really negative in pretty much all of the versions, especially the novel. So I'm like, there is certainly that I think is kind of carried through. It is interesting to think about the movie coming out in 1922 on the heels of World War I, and definitely the director, the actor, they had been in the war, like it had an influence on them. So, and the sort of, I mean, World War I caused World War II, right? Honestly, that like the fallout and impact in Germany led directly to the rise of fascism.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of ideas that you can put onto or take from the film because it gives you so little in terms of plot and so much in terms of atmosphere that like it's a canvas that is ripe for, you know, adding your own ideas to it or, you know, inferring things that may have been intended and may not have been. I think given that it is a German film, that is an interesting takeaway, that it could be an allegory for the spread of fascism. I think it's obviously like very sexual in nature, and there's, some messaging there too, I think, around potentially like, a fear of homosexuality with, I think with Count Dracula, like spreading the like disease to Harker, another man. I think there is like something there too that probably feels taboo, whether that's a fear of a criticism of it or just, an artist trying to work through his own issues with that. I don't know, but
yeah. Well, I'm glad there's still some kind of, I wasn't reading too much into it, that it is just like, that is what art does. It has a reflective surface to it that can indicate something about the people who made it and the culture that it was made in and for. So it was interesting to think about, and I encourage other people to think about it. If anybody out there has opinions, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. Ryan, do you have any further thoughts on the difference between Nosferatu and Dracula? Like, I feel like you have been like very, very adamant about that in the past, and I'm curious to hear more of your rantings on the subject.
Don't you dare encourage him.
Yeah,
he'll go on a marathon.
Yeah, maybe not. So the 22 Nosferatu obviously had to distance itself a little bit from Dracula. By 79, was it in public domain? I think so. By the making of this one, it was free up to grab. And then, since then it's like the reason there's a million adaptations is it's free use and Dracula's recognizable.
Yeah.
And there is something about the Gothic horror that just kind of continues to elude, right? Kind of be this other, this interesting. So giving the like backstory kind of to Nosferatu to be like, oh, Orlok or Dracula's like from this demon, somehow he was wrapped up in the occult, where Stoker's Dracula just like is. The Coppola one tries to give some reasoning, right? There's like a bizarre
he has
back
like a whole
history,
war and it's Vlad Tepes and whatever else.
Yeah, the book Dracula just kind of borrows from a shit ton of stuff. I mean, people are like, "Oh, Vlad Tepes." It's possible Stoker didn't even really know about that. He just read cool words in the library. Honestly, he was about he was like maybe one step above a dime novelist.
There you go.
Like he really was. He wrote romance novels. Like this is what that Dracula was, a romance novel. Mm-hmm. It just happened to like use horror trappings because that was kind of cool at the time, and it paid off for him. It was like the only thing anyone fucking remembers of his shit.
Yeah.
So I think one of the bigger differences, Dracula makes vampires, right? That's like kind of the thing. He bites people, he makes people into vampires. Here, Orlok just fucking kills people, right? And he spreads the disease, people die. There's tons of like death around him. He kills
turns Harker into a vampire.
But he kills everybody
else. He turns
else.
Harker, but he kills everyone else, yeah seemingly. And so that's definitely an interesting departure. I guess in this version, Harker becomes a vampire. That's not the case in the 1922 version. There's also just like a mashing of characters that kind of happens when you transition anything from a book. But like this is the most confusing version because this is Mina, not Lucy, that is Harker's wife, except some of it is the stuff with Lucy because she's the one that like sleepwalks and sees the stuff and gets made into a vampire first. And like there's just stuff that's like completely... This character of Van Helsing is like different. Mm-hmm. Like he like initially doesn't believe in any of it versus like being the one who's like, oh, it's a vampire. Like he's the one that's like, it's a vampire and here's the rules with vampires versus like just getting a book somehow. Someone wrote a book on all of it. So I think that there's like differences just in how it's presented, but we're seeing, like I said, less of a charismatic. This Dracula is fucking weird. He looks weird. He looks like a demon. He looks right from something else. He kills people. There's this attempt at sympathy in this version. I would say the 1922 doesn't really give a shit either.
Yeah.
But he's just more mindless like death than he is like out trying to make vampires.
Yeah, he's kind of surviving and feeding on sustenance.
He's not trying to create an army.
Blindly
He's
spreading. He doesn't have like a harem, or he's not building, he's not doing the Dracula pyramid scheme that the other Draculas do.
I think the 22 version has the women, wives, whatever you want to call them. This one skips those. Most of the adaptations have that. In particular, they're like very horny and out there in the Coppola version, which in the book is like way hornier than most adaptations. I think that's the one thing that's kind of funny to me is these all come off like relatively weirdly horny, but they're all less horny than the book is. The Coppola's is probably the closest that someone's recently come to being like, let's kind of actually try to go back to that.
Dracula 2000 was pretty horny, Ryan.
Okay, all right, yeah. Maybe a Blackula, probably.
Yeah,
right?
probably Blackula.
So yeah, this one has like some of that in how he's going after Lucy, but there's the female vampires are very like, they come on to Harker, like he's like wanting to submit to them, like stuff like that. That's all important in the like crazy hallucination dream that Harker has. That here I'm like, it's kind of weirded me out that I'm like, there's fucking no one in this castle, but the vampire doesn't eat, but he has a shit ton of food. Like, does he have a garden out there that he tends to in the dark?
He has chickens, apparently.
He just like summons it from it beyond,
Yeah. He asked the demon for some for
he
dinner
has
for his
H-E-B
friend.
ready-made meals in the back.
He just has a freezer just in case someone comes to visit.
Yeah, who knows? Oh,
cool. Well, any other closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, it's interesting that vampires. It's like vampires and zombies, right? There's horror, I guess, that sticks around, like the Wolfman and Frankenstein, that we kind of keep seeing some adaptations of, and they're kind of in the mythology, but it's like really coming back to the well on vampires and zombies like over and over and over again. Both of which have a mythology, both of which are fucking bastardized from their original mythologies. Through some like particular instances. The rules on them constantly change all the way around, but I guess it's because they're more mythological than the others. The werewolf is probably the closest to like actually also kind of having that mythology around it. Like historically.
You mean like Frankenstein's monster really doesn't qualify into that? It's kind of like,
right, because it's a direct adaptation of the book. Like with the rules kind of
it doesn't have a
change,
cultural history.
But right, there isn't this history of a man made a like. I mean, there's myths, stories like Greek myths, right, or whatever that.
And like all this other shit,
but they're not exactly the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like
yeah,
it is what it is. Like the concepts are there, like right of like what that is, but there's not this like ancient mythology that's been this obsession with the dead and the dead coming back.
Yeah,
that somehow vampires and zombies, I guess they hit upon that, like we all know death is coming and maybe we don't want to die, but maybe we don't want to be a vampire that lives forever either. Or like, well, what does it take? What's the sacrifice to make that happen? So it's interesting to me why that, like, it just kind of keeps coming up. And I'll say, honestly, very often it doesn't do anything new for me. Like, it's just another version of kind of the same thing.
I am, because I took a course at UT on vampirology. I'm very interested in the mythology of vampires.
Jonathan is a certified vampire hunter.
That's right. That's me. I have my tiny holy water bottles and my stakes. And I go from town to town sussing out vampires. But it always was, it was interesting to hear. I've heard from two different perspectives. One, because I love mythology in general. And I've heard from scholars who really like Greek mythology that any bastardization is still good because it is an oral tradition passed down. It's like you get Percy Jackson or you get Disney's Hercules, fuck it. It continues to perpetuate the myth, and it breeds this kind of like lineage of where this character came from. But then my professor for vampirology was like, fuck Twilight and fuck everything that has made vampires pretty boys and all this shit. Vampires were born from blood and they were born from Christian expansion. And I'm like, all right, that's good to know. And great to kind of like remind people of that when you sparkle in the sunlight, it's because you've been drinking the blood of Christ, and you can live forever if you drink the blood of Christ. And that's why people believed in vampires and like the whole split between them and werewolves and all that stuff. And so kind of see both sides of this coin of like the importance of perpetuating the story and some of the absurdities of it and the things that come about it. Like this had moments of being welcomed and unwelcoming things. Like there's a whole moment where Lucy talks about how like the consecrated host can ensnare like the vampire, and she crumbles up, the Eucharist and puts it around Jonathan Harker to keep him stationary. And there's kind of this flip in like the mythology there, where as long as you put like some kind of barrier around them, you can keep them contained even after you've invited them inside your house. To that degree, there's like other things in the vampire myth that are like vampires are OCD. That's why they count from
just give them shit to count.
Constantly counts shit. You just need to give them shit to count, and that's totally what they'll go for, and whatever else. So like kind of parting thoughts on it are that I'm glad that even though I jested earlier and said like this is the horror version of Little Women, it's been remade so many times and whatever else, I'm still glad, even with Twilight out there, that there is a perpetuation of the mythology that continues, because I think that it has something important for contemporary audiences to resonate with and to understand. And even in Herzog's 79, which is now, over 30 years separated from us, there's still something, 40 years at this point.
Yeah, 45 years.
Jesus. There's still something that like you can see in it that is interesting. Like I said, just trying to like read into it. And I'm, it just makes me happy. I'm glad to think that there's something out there that perpetuates this lineage, this mythology for us to keep thinking on.
Yeah.
So,
John, building on that, would you recommend this movie?
I would recommend this movie. Yeah. I think that I would also recommend Francis Ford Coppola's version as well. I'm just going to try to sneak that in there too. But I think that it continues this interesting perspective. I don't know now if I can recommend Nosferatu to modern audiences. It's because it's one of those silent movie things.
The 22 version.
Yeah, the 22 thing. It's just harder for people to get into that. But here I could see somebody at least understanding and having this kind of like real visceral feeling to a lot of the mood and ambience of it. Probably not if they have a short attention span. They'll be pissed off about it. But I still had a really good time, and I felt really unsettled by Klaus Kinski's performance. So I felt like it has some merits to it. Like, yeah.
Bruno Ganz is unsettling too as Jonathan Harker. Like he's also, very similar, like big-eyed, works very well in the expressionist genre and, kind of adds to the atmosphere as well.
For sure. Like shit, the sexual tension between them when he gets walked near a chair in a fireplace. I was like, oh God, I don't know what's going to happen. Are they going to fuck or fight or like just smoke cigars and talk? I don't know.
Before we move on to Ryan, John, as a secondary question, what is your favorite Dracula film that you have seen?
Oh, why are you going to put this on me? Having seen Dracula 2000, you just, you do this to me. I guess I am going to go with Coppola's Dracula, despite the fact that Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder are not great in it from an acting perspective. It is a technical tour de force of practical effects. There's a lot of fantastic performance from Gary Oldman and a lot of really cool stylistic things that are being done that go beyond what Werner Herzog is trying to do with this film. And especially, obviously they surpass what Nosferatu was trying to do because they have more capability in the 90s. But like they built a whole like life-size, like room-size book to do like projected shadows on for like a transitional sequence where they have a train like in the distance and it's shadow, and it's so fucking cool. Like I can't rave about it enough. That's just my definitive version, despite it not being the greatest from acting. But whatever.
Cool. Ryan, would you recommend Nosferatu the Vampire? And what is your favorite Dracula / Nosferatu film?
I'm like a pass on this, I think, because it's so slow. I think it's very pretty. There's great cinematography.
Gorgeous film.
Yeah, the locations, like the way that's done is really great. I agree that like the casting and the way the characters are played for what this is really great. Like they're all like Renfield's fucking nuts and weird.
I love Renfield.
Right. And yeah, as well. Like I think that's all great. I like Klaus Kinski, like just he's, a prolific B actor, honestly, like, and I enjoy him in tons of stuff. It's weird to me that this is a 1979 movie because it feels so much older. And I think that's cool that they pulled that off, but it feels so much older. I also am like kind of down on the 22 Nosferatu. I think it's important historically, but it's not really that great. I do think the look of Nosferatu is cool in that one in Orlok, and like the way they do, like where he raises up out of the grave, like that's kind of the classic, or the creeping of the shadow. For a silent movie, that really works, right? You really have to get a lot across because you have very little to work with.
Yeah.
I do think the better silent German expressionist film is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. That is more entertaining and grabs you more from a plot standpoint than Nosferatu does.
Yeah.
I'm like, the fact that Herzog thinks this isn't, and I'm like over Caligari or over Fritz Lang, like Metropolis. Like there's, I'm like, he's wrong. Those are, and those are still watchable. Yes. I think those are still watchable now, and very like interesting in their own element and what they brought. Like Nosferatu did bring kind of horror forward. It probably wasn't until like Universal Dracula that it really became like a genre and not just sort of like some supernatural stories. But that was a big part of it, right? Of an influence in the future. Castlevania, for me, honestly, games, show, all of it. Like I'm really fucking into Castlevania, like always have for a long time. I feel like the adaptation that's on Netflix is awesome. Like it adds so much more. Yeah. I like the Dracula, the idea. The games somewhat get it across in the later ones, but the show does a really good job of providing a somewhat sympathetic while simultaneously like horrifying Dracula, and the exception of like all the other vampires are obsessed with him and his power. But this guy that's like was kind of normal, but then driven to this by the death of his wife, and then just wants revenge on the entire world, like bathed in blood, like how far he goes with it. But then you just get fucking cool animation and whips and spells and fire and like all on top of it. It's great.
It's pretty sick.
Cool. Well, I would definitely recommend this movie. Nosferatu the Vampire is my favorite Dracula Nosferatu movie that I have seen. It's just so beautiful to look at, and the ethereal, dreamlike vibes are unlike anything that I have ever seen. Like I think there are other directors who do that super well, like David Lynch or Ingmar Bergman, that do dreamlike stuff in a fascinating way. Herzog, I think, does it differently in this film than I have seen before. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's better, but I think it's just a fascinating approach to filmmaking that I haven't really seen done quite in this way before. It's just every scene is so beautiful. Like there's just so many beautiful shots of like mountains and landscape as he's traveling. Probably my favorite shot in the movie is where Dracula is walking towards you down that tunnel, and there's that light in the back, and you can see his head like as a shadow, and then he keeps walking towards you, and all of a sudden he's like standing in the light, and he is like his head is taking up the entire space that the light in the back of the tunnel was before, and he's just like staring menacingly into the camera. But there's just so many really cool sequences in this that had me just really into the vibes of the film. I loved the score. I think it's just some really fascinating music that just creates this vibe that is just slightly different than anything that I've seen before. So I think if you're into cinema and you're trying to find something interesting, I think this is a fascinating film to check out and just see something that is maybe just on a slightly different wavelength than anything that I've seen before.
Yeah. The mirror reflection scene was cool too.
That was awesome, yeah, where he's coming in behind Lucy and she can see his shadow, but he doesn't show up in the mirror.
Very well done.
Super well done, yeah.
I fucking loved it.
What other Herzog should people check out? Have you watched any other stuff?
That's a good question. I have not seen Agira Wrath of God, which I have heard is one of his better films. I've seen Fitzcarraldo, which I think is just kind of crazy that it happened, and it's worth seeing because it's just wild. But I didn't like love the movie in itself, but it's just shocking to see that they like literally hauled a ship over a mountain. Like they just fucking did it. I haven't seen Burden of Dreams, the documentary about it. I really want to watch that at some point. But I've seen a lot of Herzog's modern documentaries where he does a lot of nihilistic narration, which I always love every time. And I've seen Strajek, I think is how you say it. And that's an interesting movie, kind of like an Americana film that he did in the 80s. So I've liked everything that I've seen of his, and I want to explore more of his filmography. I haven't seen like Grizzly Man and other stuff that he's become very famous for. So Herzog is like a bit of a blind spot for me. I've seen probably like 8 or 9 of his films, but the majority of those being like documentaries that he's made in the last 5 years. So I need to go back and see more of his classic stuff, especially now after watching Nosferatu the Vampyr and loving it as much as I did. What about you, Ryan? I know you saw Grizzly Man, right? Have you seen any other Herzog that you liked?
I saw the trailer.
Oh,
just the trailer.
For Grizzly Man. I saw the trailer for Grizzly Land and ruined it for everyone in the theater, apparently. Yeah. No, actually, I haven't really seen Herzog's stuff. Like that was one thing that I had wanted to check this out because I know him for documentaries, but know that he's made so much stuff. Mm-hmm. And honestly, typically, what I hear is like, it's all good. It's all kind of different. He just seems to have kind of settled into wanting to make, like, I think he kind of makes what he wants to make, which is really interesting too.
One of his documentaries that I really enjoyed from a couple of years ago was about meteor strikes. And it just like he went and explored different like craters on the earth and like, talked to scientists about what was happening around then and what could, it was just like super interesting. And a lot of it was just Herzog traveling and interviewing scientists about stuff. And it was riveting.
Have either of you seen Shadow of the Vampire, the like 2000 film?
We just heard about that today.
Yeah, Lane was telling us about that. I have not seen that, yeah.
When you first mentioned this movie, I thought of that movie for a minute because I thought that was the title of that movie. And then when I looked and I was like, oh, this is Herzog. Going, okay. But then I was thinking back again. I'm like, man, I thought that movie was pretty fucking cool and funny.
It sounds really
and I need to
interesting
revisit that one. Yeah, the plot is the making of the 1922 Nosferatu, and it's all the names of all the people, but the Max Schreck character who plays Orlok in the 22 version, played by Willem Dafoe in this, like actually is a vampire.
Love that.
Yeah, and I was like, that's a great concept. Willem Dafoe's fucking off the chain. I mean, he's off his rocker. Great, like what it needs to be. And
he's
it's just
in the new Eggers
Nosferatu,
so very exciting to see what he plays in that.
Yeah, the casting on that movie is just great because it's like Eddie Izzard, Dafoe, like
Udo
just
Kier.
They got all
John Malkovich,
and then Malkovich is Malkovich is the director. Malkovich, which is great. He just gives a great like intensity to all of it, just fucking yelling at people.
Cool. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Afterthoughts. If you have any opinions on your favorite Dracula spinoff or Nosferatu movie, let us know on our Discord or leave us a review and tell us what you think. I have been your host, Michael Dixon. With me, as always,
Ryan King. Hey, Darla, it's time to put the kids to bed. Turn on Herzog's Nosferatu. Don't worry, they'll be asleep before anything violent happens.
It can lull you to sleep. Be awake when you watch this movie. Watch it while it's dark outside, but like right as it's gotten dark. So you still have some energy.
He's
there.
a little, Have one cup of coffee.
And
John Garcia. If you consider a vampire to be a Dracula, then I highly recommend checking out Midnight Mass as well.
Oh, yeah.
Which is not about Dracula, but a vampire. I've also asked ChatGPT to give me a Werner Herzog sign-off.
Oh.
I would like to try,
Oh, boy.
Let's hear it.
if I may. Let's see what AI can do. And so we come to the end of Nosferatu's discussion, a film not simply about a vampire, but about the futility of trying to resist the forces of fate and darkness that bind us all. I hope you have enjoyed this and grasped at least some of its deeper shadows. ChatGPT didn't really do too well of a job, but whatever, we try.
Life is nothing but pain.
It is the pain, refusing, instead of drinking water, to drink the bitter blood of another man. And then sweep away the Eucharist around his feet so that he may be freed to feed upon the others.
John, we cut this 5 minutes ago.
Oh, okay. Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Did the Dodgers win? Or was it the Yankees?
Does it matter?
Whether a man has his legs broken by a bookie or broken by a bus doesn't really make a difference.